Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining this session at DynamicsCon. My name is John Kirsch. I'm the GP Product Lead at Dynamic Consulting. And first off, I want to say thank you to everybody who went out and voted as the sessions were open. So glad everybody participates and helps to set the agenda of this conference, and glad to see so much good content being presented here. So again, thanks everybody for participating in that. We're going to jump in quickly here with our limited time. So I want to just kind of call out where you're at. You're at the GP Express time-saving tips and features for everyone. So this is going to cover a whole bunch of items that'll help you navigate and use GP and optimize your time while you're using it. So that's our goal for today's session. So as I mentioned, there's a little bit about me on the screen here. I've been using GP for over 20 years. So I've had a lot of experience, and I kind of note in here that I've used GP in a number of different roles. So I've been a consultant for a number of years now, but I've also been at 3 different companies that have used Dynamics GP. So I have experience in being a user and supporting it from the IT side, as well as being a consultant. So I really enjoy the different roles and getting to know a lot of folks now using it differently and helping to give some advice and use that the best way possible. A few other pieces, I've been presenting at a number of different conferences. I've been certified with GP for a number of different options. So I've completed the Microsoft years ago, and then also have completed the other more recent GP certifications. In some of my free time, I've also been a member of the board of directors at Golden House in Green Bay, which is a nonprofit center that supports domestic violence, and have also spent a lot of time with my kids. Father of 5, so spend a lot of time coaching or supporting them in sporting events or other activities. So a little bit about myself, and like to share and hopefully get to talk to everybody in the chat hereafter. So if you have any questions, feel free to put those into the chat, but we'll also have the live Q&A session after. So happy to connect and hopefully answer any of those questions here that come up. So again, a little restate here of the session goals. A really simple one. This session is geared towards saving you time, making it a little bit easier to use GP. So pretty simply stated, we're going to cover a whole bunch of areas, some navigation, some features, with that goal in mind. And so a little bit of sharing. Again, I've worked with a lot of different GP implementations or customers. So I've touched hundreds of different environments with GP. So part of my thought for this session is really getting into and talking about some of those things that I've seen saving time. So I hear that common feedback. Some of these may seem a little bit simple even. And a lot of times what I see though is these are items that are covered in the initial training when GP gets implemented, but then it doesn't really get touched or kind of gone back to after. And a lot of times it gets lost over the years, but these are things that I'll kind of challenge everybody. If you have a couple of screens that you're able to work on, some of these will be really simple navigation that maybe you want to have that open on your other screen, and you can add some of these shortcuts or tips and put them in place right away. And even if it saves you, a few seconds every time you do this, over time that can really add up. So I guess give you that little heads up here. If you want to kind of follow along in your GP, there's probably some things that you can quickly add on and take advantage of here. So with that said, we'll go ahead and jump into the first item. So I will be switching over and navigating a lot of these inside of the GP environment. So these slides will be available, and be able to see these as well, to be able to follow up if there's any questions after the fact. But I'm going to switch over now and switch over to GP and show you these in live fashion. So the first item that we want to talk about here is the company login screen. So this is one that maybe you've seen a lot of times, maybe just kind of say it's easy to click OK over and over again as you log in. But especially if you only have one live GP company, or really only go into one main company, even though you maybe have access to several, checking this remember this company box will not have to have you click OK on the screen every time you start up GP. So save you a few seconds and just be able to kind of bypass that screen. Now, one of the things whenever I share this, though, I like to also mention is sometimes we lose that screen. So if you've ever lost it and maybe you do have multiple companies and you want to pick which one you log into every time you start GP, very simple process here. Come down to the bottom where the company name is and go ahead and open that up. And you'll get this screen back and just uncheck it and click OK. And as soon as you do that, next time it will actually prompt you for that company to be picked. So a good way, easy way to kind of turn that off or on, and that will save you time again every time you open up GP. All right, so speaking of opening GP, the next one I want to share is a startup option. So I've seen this a number of times where it's very effective, that we want to open a certain screen or report or some information every time we log into GP. Now, I'm going to use the example as if I am in the collections side of things and I want to see any past due customers. So we're going to use that as an option, but you can all think about that of if you always go to one screen every time you start GP, well, I can just add that to my navigation here and not have to have all those extra clicks that are involved. To start out, we're going to add a shortcut here. So on our navigation pane on the left-hand side, by default, you'll see a startup folder. And if there's nothing in it, it'll be blank to the left here. Once we add something, we'll start to see that triangle show up next to this line. So I'm going to right-click on here and say Add. And I am going to add a smart list in my instance, but you can add any one of the shortcut options here. So a GP window, start a macro, or even some external items like a web page or a different shortcut for like an application. So I'm going to click on smart list here. And at this point, it's just going to give me the option to browse out and find one of my smart list favorites. So I'm going to expand customers, and I'm going to look for that past due customer list that I mentioned. So again, that's going to add that and click done. So now at this point, you're going to see that I do have that triangle, and when I expand it, my smart list is listed here as a shortcut. So even when it's in the startup, I can click on it and you'll see it will launch that smart list for us, and there it is. So just 2 customers on there. I can see my buckets, I can see the balances there. So 2 might not look too bad, but the goal of this might be to help out to make sure that stays small. But now just to demonstrate that, I'm going to go ahead and close out of GP, and we'll just relaunch that here. So I'm just going to launch it as you would normally launch GP. I'm going to use my login, and while this loads, again, I'm not getting prompted for my company because I had checked that box. While this loads, I do want to let you know that you can know that this is only for your user. So just like a lot of your other personalizations on your homepage, this won't affect anybody else. This will be for your user account, and we'll be able to just launch that for you. So with that said, you can see it taking just the normal, kind of few seconds for GP to get loaded and launched all the way in the background. But my smart list loaded right in the foreground here, and you can see that smart list is open once again. So again, something probably for you all to think about individually, what screens or what options might work, but able to easily add that startup option so you can save that. The last thing I'll mention about this is you don't have to have just one, or you're not limited to just one option in here. So if you want to add multiple because you typically go into several screens, or you just always have those open when you go into GP, feel free to add those in here. One last thing, I guess, add one more in here. We can easily drag any of these existing ones up into that startup folder. So you can see I just clicked and dragged one of my other shortcuts. I dropped it in there. Now I would have 2 items opening every time I open GP. So just for my purpose, I'm going to drag that back out and just leave the one. And I am all set now to be able to use that smart list. All right, so I'm going to talk about one more option that I use with Smart List here, and we're going to look at this to-do section in the middle here. So right now I have a couple of reminders here. I have some overdue invoices, I have some payables that are due here. But one of the things I like to do with these is if I have, again, I think of this, if I have a role of something that I really need to watch, this is a good place to put this. So every time I log into GP, I can easily see that information. So I'm going to show you about adding a reminder here. So I'm going to say a new reminder, and I'm going to go down to this bottom part because I created a couple of smart lists that I want to add and keep track of. So I'm going to click new, and I'm going to look up again for my smart list. So I know the name of them. We can certainly browse out to smart lists as you normally would do and create a new smart list and save that favorite. I have one called active holds, and these are for sales documents. So these would be like a credit limit hold or something like that that we set up in the system. So I'm going to create this one called active holds. And down on the bottom, it's the options of when do we want to see this show up on that to-do list there for the reminders. So for me, if there's at least one document or more, I want to see this active holds. So I'm going to say greater than 0. So as soon as I have one, I'm going to see that. We can also total on a certain column, like if we're talking about past due, like we were talking about before, maybe a customer has to have over a certain dollar amount or something like that. We can also work off of column values as well. So within this, I'm going to also check this bottom box here, so display as queue. And to me, this is a really nice piece for the important items, and I'll show you why I say that here. So I'm going to say OK, and I'm going to go ahead and add one more. So same logic here, or same process. I'm going to go find my smart list, and I called this one removed holds. So I'm going to select that. I'm going to also say greater than 0 and display as queue. Okay, so I see those two down on the bottom here. And now I've got that all set. So I'm going to go ahead and say OK. So I do have to refresh. It would take effect the next time you log into GP. So you can wait to see that, or if I hit my refresh button, you can see they showed up right away here. So I still have those other couple of reminders that were in here before, but now I have the two that I just added, and that checkbox that we talked about to display as queue turns them into kind of these icons on the top. And I really like that view for the important items. I like to flag those so that they show up on the top, and also, especially if they have some sort of relative value to each other, you can see the stack of paper here for 1 is much smaller than the stack of paper for 10. So it not only gives you, number here on the screen, but also gives you that visual indicator. So again, this gives us a nice, easy place to see those information. And if I'm somebody managing those documents that are on hold, I can go ahead and click on this. That'll take me right to the smart list. And so I see the one document on hold, and then all the normal processes apply here. Like I can actually go into the sales transaction entry window and review it and potentially remove that from hold if I'm ready to do so. So again, saving time, helping monitor your important items, helping you just be more efficient at your job. Hopefully, again, another item that you can think about those smart lists that you use and those key items that maybe you need to track and make them very easy for you to find those key pieces of information for your job. All right. So our next task, I'm going to use Smart List again. So using that for this, but I'm going to start talking about some macros. Macros in GP can really be helpful to do some repetitive tasks. So I'm going to set this up very briefly, but I'm going to go in and set up a new site, and I'm just going to call it 000, and I'm going to call it new site. When I save this, I will have to add a quick bin in here because I am using bins. So I'm going to do that very quickly as we set up. But then we are going to go ahead and walk through this process. So if you've ever set up inventory items, for one example, you know that they can take a fair amount of clicks and different windows to navigate through, just like it takes here even just to set up that new site. So now if I want to go through and maybe I have a significant number or even kind of a decent number of items that I want to go ahead and add all of my inventory items to that site, that can be a bit of a task to do that in certain situations, or especially if I'm adding new items and I want to get them added and then have a process to add them to the site. But I don't necessarily want to do all items. and I maybe can't use some of the filtering options. There's different reasons. But what I'd like to do then is record a macro, so I don't have to go through all of those specific steps to go ahead and make those changes. So I'm going to do a simple search here and just pull up about 15, 20 items. Let's say 15. And we'll get a list of items here. So we know this is a brand new site. I just created it, haven't done anything with it yet. And now I want to assign these items to the site. So if I had enough that I need to work through, it's going to save me a lot of time to use that macro. So just to walk through that, if you haven't used macros before, it's in the Tools menu of any one of your GP windows. So if I go Tools, Macro, and Record, as soon as I click this button here to record, it's going to start tracking every one of the steps that I do to make that work. So it's going to just replay that over and over again, or even keystrokes that are going on. So I'm going to go ahead and start this. I'm going to click record, and I'm going to name it, and I'm going to call it this item site add, and I'm saving this. So now it's recording what I'm doing in the system. So I'm going to go ahead. First step is double click on this item. I'm going to now go to my quantity sites, and I'm going to add that site ID, which was 000. I'm going to tab off of that field, so now you can see that new site name right here. I'm going to save it, close this window, and stop recording. So as you can see, going through those steps, very simple, but has 5, 7 clicks somewhere in there, plus typing in that site number and a number of steps to do that. So at this point, I've recorded the steps. I can highlight this item just to show you, and I can say macro play. And I can add this and say open, and you'll see it kind of flash on the screen a couple of times, and it tells me it ran for 3 seconds and it's done. So just to double check that, now I can go into this item. Let's just replay this real quick. Let's go to site ID and which ones are assigned. I scroll over and I do see it's assigned to this site. So it worked as we expected to, but that's still a lot of clicks to go tool menu and go through those steps. So I actually ahead of time kind of went through this, but I'm going to redo this where on my navigation pane, I can right click and click add, and I can add that macro in. And when I do that, it's going to give me a box where I can browse out and find that macro wherever I saved it on my computer, and I can name that macro. And the last thing I can do is go ahead and add a keyboard shortcut to that. And that's going to be really a key here for speeding up my usage here. So I'm going to look at the shortcut properties of the one that I had already created, and you can see my F5 key is assigned. You can see this was the path to open that, and I named it add item to new site. So I'm all set up here with F5 being my shortcut key. So I'll OK that to save it. Open my smart list back up, and now rather than clicking all those tools and navigation, I'm going to hit F5 and that item is done. And now as quickly as I can move through, I can click on each one of the lines, press F5, and then run through these. So in this instance, if I had kind of a small number of items, that isn't going to take too long. I can navigate through those just with essentially 2 clicks for each one and save it. The other thing this also helps with, though, is accuracy. If I have a worry that I'm going to type the wrong site ID, or just the kind of redundancy of clicking, am I getting to the right windows, or even adding more time to it, there's a lot of ways that this can speed up that time, just to be able to do that quick entry or changes and finish that up. So I certainly have used this with item updates, a few other things with items, not only the sites, sometimes with price levels. If we're not able to necessarily use copy or things like that with items, sometimes adding price levels to a number of items can be really nicely done with this macro feature. Also adding the vendor assignments for items as well can work really well. One of the other areas because this can be done in any area. I've recorded a macro and added a shortcut key if you do a lot of purchasing from sales orders. So there's a number of clicks to get the purchase order ultimately generated in that situation. So rather than having to click through each one of those, record a macro, assign a shortcut key, and then as soon as you get done with your sales order, just hit that shortcut key and it walks through all of those steps to get to the purchase order. So there is probably a pretty good number of repetitive tasks that you do that if we're always filling in the same information, it can be recorded and save you clicks and time to be able to use that. The last thing I'll mention is macros are kind of picky. Like I mentioned, it's recording every single piece or click or typing that you're doing. So it can kind of throw you off at times. One of the things that is good to think about is right now, because of the way I went through that one, if I pick an item that had already been assigned to that site, because of the way it works, it's saving it after I type in a site. That site is already assigned, but it doesn't give me any errors. It still would just go through and allow me to complete that process like I just hit there. Certain items or certain macros, if something is already assigned, it might pop up a message and tell you that. Then it's going to stop the macro wherever it is. So there are some things to think about when you're using macros, just to make sure that the conditions will all be met, so you don't have any extra prompts or anything that pops up that would interrupt the flow of that macro. If we did have a much larger list, there is also the option to do a mail merge macro, where essentially we take that macro and we just copy it over and over again, but we change the item number that we're using for it. So instead of having to click on each one of those, we could actually open the window with a specific item number and just copy that so it repeats itself over and over again. So we can do that by creating it once and then having a list of item numbers and using the word mail merge feature and putting that into one big document. So I'm not going to go through all of that, but there certainly are a number of blogs out there, and maybe one I'm going to look to add to our blog site just to have another reference out there for anybody looking to use that feature as well. All right, so I'm going to have a quick one here, but we're going to refer a little bit more to other shortcuts. And I want to touch on that is like we did with that macro, we have this shortcut properties and really want to call out this keyboard shortcut down on the bottom. So again, we assigned F5. If you've heard me talk at some of the other conferences or at DynamicsCon in the spring, I have a couple of them that I have referenced in some of my past ones because I always use them. And so my F2 key is almost always my sales transaction entry window. Just because I use that, I work with a lot of customers, so I just know if I hit F2, I've already had that assigned. So let's walk through that though, as if I didn't have a shortcut. One of the easy ways to do this is open any window that you use a lot in GP, go File, and Add to Shortcuts. And once you do that, because I had one earlier that was up here, it put a number 2 after it. But anyone that we add, we can go ahead and right click and look at the shortcut on the bottom and pick any unassigned keys here. And there's all sorts of them if we start to use Shift and Control Shift. But most of the time, using just the F keys on the top have enough to fill up the options that you would want to use. But the really great thing that I like about this is that no matter where I am, I don't have to be in sales. I can have some other window open and I hit my F2 and I can then open that window. So again, really common used fields. I have F2 as my sales and F3 as my purchase order. So those are common ones that I use. I also, what I've talked about in other sessions before, if I hit my F10 key, my workflow maintenance is always my F10 key. And the reason I do that is because a lot of times when you're creating a workflow and testing it, you might move over to another window, like I have my purchase orders here. I'm testing that out. I close this window, I go make some changes or testing that out. And then I want to get back to here to make some changes. I want, kind of quick, easy navigation. So you can think about that. One of the most common I've seen is for those folks that use or take phone calls and are using GP to look up information. I've seen that used quite a bit. So it might open like your customer inquiry window, or maybe a smart list where you get all the way to the filter where you enter a customer ID so that it can easily enter that in and start to look for their invoices or their orders that you might have questions on. So those things that you need to get to quickly, and that's where like incoming phone calls come into play, that we can make navigation really quick and kind of seamless and be able to help with your business flow or workflow and make that really efficient. So certainly encourage that very, very simple one. This is one, again, if you have GP open right now, you can think about those. Let's add a couple of windows over here in your navigation pane and be able to take advantage of that time. All right. Similarly, I'm going to add a couple of options here. And actually, for time's sake, I already created these. But under reports and trial balance, I'm going to say my role has a need to look at trial balances quite often. And I might want a current trial balance and a previous month trial balance. So we'll take a look at one of these. And in here, kind of normal settings, but I'll note down on the bottom is that, with GP, we can pick beginning of period and end of period. So rather than having an actual date range that I need to change, I can just create a couple of options here. So maybe I have a year-to-date one for beginning of year and end of current period. Certainly could be an option as well. So you can create as many of these as you want. But when I click My Reports here, it will actually give me an option. This one's already added, but it'll give me an option to add it to My Reports and actually change the name of how it appears on there. So that gives me the option then in GP, if we have our standard toolbar turned on, so I just right click up here and make sure standard is checked, and I do, you'll see here My Reports. And now I have current month trial balance and previous month trial balance. And I also added one other one called Open Orders here. So in here, I can just click on it. I don't have to go through all the options, insert it, hit print. It comes right to my trial balance. So I can open those very quickly. Don't have all those clicks to create it. And I also don't need to change my filters for like this month's date. And then the same thing for previous month. I can run that anytime I need to. So really speeding up not only the part of navigating and getting to that report, but I can get to it easily from the home screen of GP, no matter which module I am or wherever I am at the time when I need to open that. Also then, just to show you the smart list side of it, I have one for my open sales orders here. So you can see this is a filtered list for those open orders, and it'll open right to that. So again, not having to click on smart list and expand the sales side of it and get all the way down to this one, it goes right to that smart list. So definitely a time saver here to add those, and especially taking advantage of those report filtering options to have those saved. It will also add that to my reports on my home screen, which is also nice. A little bit easier, again, that your menu is always available, but just another easy way to run those reports from your home screen. Last thing I want to mention with this, kind of the maintenance side of it, if you will, is that if you want to change those, you can go ahead under Administration and My Report List here. So that'll bring up a navigation list, and you can see here those are the 3 that we're showing. So if I don't want one of these in here anymore, I can go ahead and just check it, and I can remove from the list, or I can rename it if I need a little clarity on what that means. But it gives me the option to kind of maintain these lists here. One other piece I want to mention, just so I show you though, on the sales side, under my Smart List favorites here, you'll see that I have all of my favorites get listed that show up under sales. And if I do want to add that open orders like I already had, I do need to find my option here, which was this one. I would need to mark it, and then I would hit the add to my reports. So that one's already added, so it's grayed out. Let's go to the one above it, and there you go. You can see that I can add this, and again, when I add, I have a chance to rename it. So maybe that smart list option name isn't quite descriptive enough. I can go ahead and change it. So I'm going to cancel that. I don't need that one in there, but you can see how easy it is to go ahead and find your smart list and then add it to those reports. All right, so we're in the sales here. I'm going to navigate back to my sales transaction entry, and let me actually use my F2 key. One of the things I want to show as a time saver here as well is the quick print option. So if you are using sales transaction entry, I highly recommend this one. I almost never print without this option anymore, just because of particularly one of the features, which I'm going to talk about. So again, I do want to mention here, I've got the slides that that'll be available that do have kind of all of this outlined as well to refer back to. But as we go through here, I want to show you under Options and Quick Print Setup. This is where we turn this feature essentially on or off if we want to use it. And what this does is all the different document types that are available, because I'm on an invoice, so I can print the invoice, I can print a packing slip and a picking ticket. I can print all of these together, and I just mark this and have all of my other options that I normally would choose or not choose when printing one of these documents. So I have all of those available. And then I also have this checkbox, which is this is the one feature that I like the other parts of this, but I really like this feature being available, and that is to keep the current document displayed. So if you're using this window, you know what I mean. It always essentially saves it and clears the screen. But even if I'm just printing an invoice and I want to keep this open or one of the other fields, I can still use that for just that one option. And then I can keep it open and not have to reopen it if I want to do something else with it after. So, so I set my options, I said okay, and now I'm gonna go ahead and print that. And again, I had it selected to go to the screen, so I just hit Control Q. So that's the hotkey for this, and kind of left it to the background, but you can see I have Word templates set up here, and there's my packing slip, one of the options. So I'm gonna go ahead and just close that, and then my invoice popped up here as well. So I printed both of those. I could have printed those right to the printer if I wanted to, but now I've got both those forms. And then, as you can see in the background, I still have my invoice open. So it has it open if I need to go and do something else. I've got it available right in front of me, and I can carry on with the work that I'm doing. So really like that quick print option to both save time and, well, I guess save time after the fact and having to reopen that invoice sometimes. So I'm going to go ahead and close that. We'll save my document there. And I'm going to switch back over to the slideshow for a second here. Now this one I'm not going to walk through a demo, but I wanted to note here is there's a number of DynamicsINI settings. So for those not familiar with installing GP or maybe doing the administration side of this, there's a settings file in the install folder that can turn on a lot of different features. And I'm just calling out a few of them here that are my favorite ones that are available. But within this, you can see here, I can show advanced macro menu. What that is I can actually run macros faster, especially those mail merge ones. There's one that actually with that will turn off the screen flash. So you can, when you saw my screen kind of flashing all the navigation, it can eliminate some of that. So if we're doing a really large mail merge macro, it can fly through that without sometimes flashing up that screen in there, so saving time. If you use Payroll and HR, on the payroll side, the employee lookup, if you're using IDs that are like just numbers, but you always look up by last name, putting this setting in that DynamicsINI file, when you hit the lookup option, it will actually go right to that last name field. So you can start typing the last name and tab off of it. And there's actually another setting that's 3 instead of the value 2 here. That will set to the first name, and then there's one more that'll actually look up by social security number. So a few different options depending on how you look things up, but again, saving time in that navigation area. On the administrative side, the auto install chunks, that is if there's a chunk file that gets pushed out, this setting will not prompt anybody. It'll essentially automatically install that chunk file. So a good way if you're pushing things out for administrative purposes, that can automatically done so that you don't miss things. And then the last one I have listed, no print dialogues. So this one's an interesting one. Sometimes we really want those dialogues up there to be able to get through things and choose your printer at the end. But otherwise, we just want to hit print and we want it to come out. We don't want those extra clicks that are involved. So we can actually turn that on so that the print dialog doesn't come up at the end. So allows the user or workstation to set that preference. These are really good time-saving items here, and there are dozens of other options in that DEX file. But again, I wanted to focus on some of those that are more time-saving ones here. So if there's questions on that, I can certainly try to answer some of those at the end, or there's a lot of information available on the DEX settings and how to put those into that DEX file. All right, so got a few quick ones here we're going to run through, and I'm going to open up a sales batch here. This can be done with any batch in GP, but I want to show if I print the edit list, and this really can be done with any GP report, I should say. But when I go into an edit list, I especially like to search for any errors. So the word error, or also I search for 2 asterisks, which a lot of times in like sales, it'll show up if there's a distribution error or something like that. So I'm going to use the shortcut key, but no, there's also the find button up on the top. There's find and find next. But I'm going to hit Control F. And if I'm going through a large edit list, a lot of times I will search star like that and say, okay, not found. That's good news because I don't want any posting errors. And then in all caps, I'm going to search for error. And error is not found either. All right, so I don't have any obvious posting errors. My batch should be okay. But I do want to show you how this works. So I'm going to pick something that's on here a lot. With my test data, there's a whole bunch of zeros on here. So I'm going to search for find a 0. So I hit that, and you can see it highlighted up in the corner. Now, if I hit Control G, you can see here it's navigating through different zeros on my report. So I want to point that out because this allows you to search for certain values if you're trying to tie something out or reconciling, or again, searching for errors. So just keep in mind you have that find option and find next with Control F and Control G to quickly navigate through reports to find the information. So one more mention here. Again, if you have any questions, please put those on the chat. We'll have some time at the end very shortly here to walk through those. So I'm going to move through a few other quick items here. First off, a couple of things in your user preferences. So under your main menu, go to user preferences. If you pick a report option, and you know it prompts sometimes if it goes to printer or screen, printer is usually the default. But if I uncheck that and check screen, that'll be my normal starting spot of where it's prompting me if I want to print, where I want to print that report to. So if you find yourself switching that every time a report prompts, you probably want to come into your user preferences and switch that over. A couple other items in here, the entry key. If you're a person that uses the return key or enter key to move through fields, then you want to switch this to return. So that'll allow you to navigate with your enter key. Otherwise, the default with tab moves through the fields on each form. And the last one I want to call out on here is the document, or default sales document type. And the default in GP is to start at a quote. But if you never use a quote, if you only use invoices, or maybe you always start at order, you probably want that screen to open up that way. So you have the option here at order that every time you open the window, it will open up that way for you. Okay, so with that setting, I'm going to go ahead and OK this and move on. And as I navigate to my next screen here, I'm going to mention that there are a few bonus type items here, some time savers that are in the slides. Just due to time, I'm not going to be able to touch on everything, but want to make sure we have as much information available to you as possible. So one of my last couple here are the Payables transaction entry, and this is a new feature that came out in 2018 R2, I believe. And what this does is allow me to do the copy and paste like we've been using in GL in the Payables transaction entry as well. So I already have a file pre-formatted here that we can use to copy and paste. And what I'm going to do is actually start with the header information. And you can note here that there are some specific columns that we're pasting from. This is also an item I plan to put out on my blog. So we can reference some of this information, but it's also in the What's New documentation. So I copied that from Excel though. How this works is I have to pick a vendor. So I'm going to pick my advanced 001, and I tabbed off of that field. So that now gets me kind of my main information defaulted in. I hit my paste button, and you can see now it filled out my dollar amounts here in these screens. It filled out my document number and PO number. So it filled out these fields that I copied here. And the other thing this allows me to do is if I have specific distribution information, I can also use this formatting. And I'm going to go ahead now and drill into my distributions. And I'm going to delete what's in there first. And my paste button then becomes available because it's blank. And I hit paste, and now you can see, starting with the account number 6530, it's now filled this in with the dollar amount that I had. So obviously it needs to be just properly distributed. So we have to have a balanced entry there, but as long as that is, then I can go ahead and save or post this document. So a really nice feature if we don't have an import tool that's available that we can quickly move through and do payables transaction entry. So one more piece I'm going to use on the payables side here is the all-in-one view. So this has been around for several versions of GP, but I'm going to pick on that same vendor for a second here. And I really like this all-in-one view on the purchasing side of things. It is also available in the sales and the inventory side as well. And sales works well too, as we have orders and invoices and related documents. The example I'm going to show here is actually with this PO number 999 is if I want to look at all the related documents for any PO number here, I'm going to go ahead and check that box. Now I can see I have a receipt that's associated with, I don't have an invoice. So I can now see kind of the status of that, that purchase order. So if I uncheck that, you can see my screen refreshes. And let's look at this top one here. And I can see I do have a receipt, and I also have the invoice that goes with it. So this is a great way for that three-way match process to be able to see where it's at. I actually can also ultimately look at payments and returns that may be linked to it as well. So if you haven't been using this somewhat newer feature here, certainly a time saver for those that need to look up that information to be able to find those related documents. All right, we'll wrap up with one last setting here, and like to call this one out. This one also became available in GP 2018 R2. So this is whether we can post to or through the GL. You actually had this setting for batches for all of GP, but what became available then was to be able to turn that on by transaction. So I'd like to call this out and think about this. If you're doing a series post or opening batches to post in the GL, and every time you open those up and just post through, this is definitely a time saver and one of those items that you don't have to realize that it was missed and have to post that before you can run financials or a trial balance or something like that. So highly encourage to go back and kind of think about that setting if you're not posting through, because typically we don't want to change that if we're posting from a subledger anyways, so we have balanced entries. So a time saver and potentially an accuracy item as well. So as we wrap up, again, want to say thank you to everybody who voted for this session or for others. Thank you for attending, and we'll see everybody in the live chat right now. Hello, everyone. Hey, Sean.
Hey, John. Great session. Great session.
Hey, thanks. Yeah, thanks everybody for joining. Hope everybody picked up a few tips. I know we've got a couple of questions, but I don't know. I saw the request earlier, and I thought, hey, has anybody at DynamicsCon ever played the guitar live? So David, just a little.
Let's do it.
Little Deliverance. I guess I wasn't too well done there, but maybe some other time we can do that. So I'll take the risk of waking somebody up here. So sorry. Yeah, I'm more nervous doing that than talking about GP here, I guess.
Well, that was pretty brave. I can't play a single instrument, so that's pretty impressive. Yeah, lots of great stuff. That was actually one of the first things on my scratch pad for the questions. You know, our friend Dave Musgrave there made a request for a solo. So we'll check that one off. Good job. So thanks to everyone for joining. Excellent stuff, John. A lot of great tips there in your GP Express time-saving tips and features for everyone. A couple questions that I did see come through. One from Tori is the quick print settings to keep the invoice open on the sales transaction entry screen specific to each user, or can an admin set it for all users?
All right, so that is each user going in and setting it. So David wrote it, so he can correct me if I'm wrong here. But there might be a table or something that's behind the scenes. But as far as I've gone through, each user just going through, it takes just really a few seconds once you know what those settings are to go, just like you're normally printing. So you can just go to that quick print setup in your menu, and each user can get it to work the way they want it to.
Excellent. And each user can get to work the way they want to. Susan asks, when I have the client open to apply sales docs, it closes out the screen after applying. Would the quick print feature setting to not close the doc work in that window?
Well, I think maybe from the chat as well, others chiming in, that's a great feature to have. It's specifically on the sales transaction entry window. Is where that quick print feature is. So unfortunately, it's not a setting in that window, at least not right now. But I guess a time here to plug the ideas site. So if you have some of those ideas, especially sharing them out with the community like this, if others get on board and can vote for those, you can go ahead and get those submitted, and maybe we get that in one of the next releases. So unfortunately, not for that specific use.
Very good, very good. And then one other question I see here is, looks like Mike just found the answer, but I'm going to ask it anyway. How do you access the payables all in one view? And I guess there are a couple places, right, John?
Yeah, there's a couple places. You can actually get to it right from kind of your main navigation through like what we were talking about payables there. So through the payable site or the homepage there for it, or you can actually get to it like from the vendor card. Same thing for customers. It's actually a button up on the top, so it'll start to filter that down for you right away from there. So there's a couple other places to launch it as well. So really helpful tool there. I will say, I forget if I mentioned this as we were kind of wrapping up that, but there are some kind of filters behind the scenes of how many transactions it displays. So if you're not seeing all of your documents get in there, it is something I think in the past I blogged about it. I've shared this with a few others in the script to kind of change that. But if you need more documents in there, there's a way to quickly change that as well. So if you need that, not enough time here to kind of go through all that, but happy to share that back with anybody if they want to contact me.
Excellent. And your contact information can be found via the Brella site. Also, it's on one of your slides there from the recording. Maybe we can post your email in the chat. There we go. Perfect. How about we have a few more minutes yet? Any other questions from anyone, or maybe John? I'm curious if you have any other tips, a bonus tip or anything like that. Can I put you on the spot, either that or maybe some Soundgarden request on the
Yeah, I'd like to redeem myself. That wasn't a very good playing at the start there, but it'll have to do for now. No, I put my my email address, also my Twitter handle there. Really working on kind of reactivating and getting some blogs going. So if anybody wants to follow that, I'll get these slides will be available through this site, through our site, but with DynamicsCon, but I'll also get them up there as well. There are extra tips and trips. I just ran out of time. So so you'll see those in the slide, as well as kind of all the details of how to apply these time-saving tips in your own environment. So look for that slide deck, or again, follow me, and we'll make sure that's available to you.
Excellent. Well, we're about out of time. Any closing remarks, John?
No, thanks everybody. Thanks for the request, David. I'll keep practicing here. Maybe when we see each other live again, can do a better rendition.
Excellent.
All right, thanks everybody. Have a good day.